mic is useful?
Yeah.
Better? Oh, yes, for the recording. Right. Yeah. Sure. So, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. And it's quite well. I was afraid that after the snow it would be the rain, and I said, well, it's going to be it's the kind of the ocean first. I don't know, but yeah. And no, apparently it's okay, and the main thing is that you came. Thank you very much. So what I propose to you tonight is to talk a bit about the ocean. I think there are some specialists in the room, so I have to be careful what I'm going to say. So governance of the ocean. I think it's more and more coming in the, you can read it in the newspapers, it's really becoming something in spite of the continuous, I would say, ignorance of most of the policies at the national level, but I will come back to that. So why from the global to the local? Because I think local, you're talking about, yes, of course, implementation. That has to be local by definition. But then global, because we know, and it's not just about climate change, but we know that well, mostly impacting trends are there at a global level. And it is, well, sadly shared by all the countries, with, of course, effects that are quite different depending on the conditions at the local level. But I think it's what I'm going to try to develop tonight, is kind of, say, vision of the whole thing. It's quite complex, but at the same time, I think, well, regarding policy making, it is extremely important to have that vision, including for the people working at the local level. So just to present myself, I'm from the French Research Institute for the Sustainable Development of the Sea. Try to make it sustainable. Before it was just a development, now it's sustainable development. Okay, fine. And we have an exchange program with the JAMSTEC. Probably you all know here in Japan, which is the Japan Agency for Marine and Earth Science and Technology. So it is the main, I would say, research. Of course, there is the university too, but it is the main ocean research institute in Japan. And the OPRF, why? Because well, I'm dealing. You won't be surprised since we have the title here, Ocean Governance. I'm dealing with the maritime policy and governance, and this is my field of expertise. So this is the Ocean Policy Research Foundation, which is part of the Nippon Foundation, a kind of think tank, if you want, regarding ocean governance. So I'm working with both, and I'm here for at least till the end of the year. So if some of you want to make a contact and well talk and later, etc., not only tonight but with pleasure. So. All right, so just, you know that, 70% of the Earth, well, I think it's worth considering. And, but the volume is a three-dimension system, so 90% of the, say, living space available on this Earth, even more. So, well, I like this expression, is the ocean, the lifeblood of the Earth. You know, we're talking about the forest, the lungs of the Earth. Here, well, it's the lifeblood of the Earth. I think it's a good image. And why? Because all of this. I mean, oops, sorry. Driving weather, regulating temperature, climate change. We're all talking about it. Supporting all kind of living and mineral resources, more and more. We are, of course, there's the oil. The gas, but also now mineral resources, maybe tomorrow, and then we'll talk about it. But very much unknown still, if we compare with the space. It's incredible, but well, it's just a question of means. The means that we are putting in the space, exploration of the space, well, are well, no comparison with what is there. It's almost nothing compared to space. So it's coming now, but for many, many years, the effort was not there, but in the space. So I think it's time to look a little bit more seriously to these 70% of our planet Earth. So this, just to give you an idea, this coming from a map coming from the census, Marine Life. It was a 10 years project just to try to look at the biodiversity, study the biodiversity and the unknown. We know really little, especially when it comes to the very little microorganisms. We know absolutely nothing. So you can imagine that, well, of course, decades ago, we thought that the ocean, of course, on the coast, we know that there are a lot of fisheries, etc. But then coming to the offshore waters, we thought it was a desert, but it's not. And what you see here, of course, is the, in red, where the high spot of biodiversity, where there is the interaction between the land and the sea, extremely productive seas, especially at the level of the tropical latitude. That is, and one of the main habitats, very well known, the corals, the coral reef. So it depends. We're talking very often, very often of three oceans: Indian, Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. But well, I think we can talk about 5 oceans. Arctic now, you know, with the melting of the ice, it's becoming also a hot, hot spot, if I can say, and the Southern Ocean too. So we're gonna come back to it. Then this is a single ecological system from a global view of the planet. This is the famous global conveyor belt, as we call it, just to show, this is not fiction, but this is not well known, that they are a connection just through the currents, the main currents, a connection through the 3 oceans, then including, of course, the Arctic and the Antarctic Ocean. So it's a system, it's a machine, really. We talk about the ocean, the machine ocean. And you can, of course, it's not a fix. It's rather, I mean, the path is there, but there are variations. They are, well, depending on the movement of the Earth, etc., the attraction of the moon, the condition in regard to the sun, etc. So there are variations, and you know, all of you, for example, in that area, upper warm waters, and following the position of between the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, we have La Nina, we have El Nino, who is going to define the weather for the whole planet, and we are heading now towards El Nino, probably a cycle of 10 years or something like that. So a lot of people, scientists working on that phenomena, which is extremely important. You can imagine then for agriculture, for everything, of course, to predict the weather and in regard to the crops, etc. Then it's not a flat bottom. Well, you know it in Japan, of course, with the very deep trench here. But there's a whole ridge system, the famous plate tectonic, which is seamless. 84,000 kilometers of seamless ridges. Can you imagine? Where the crust, the Earth crust, is moving. We know it. Chile we heard one day 2 days ago, and of course with these seamless ridges in the three oceans. Something that we know globally, but when going to the bottom is something where we don't know much. Well, but we know enough, and the scientists now really get organized. You can see here a kind of plan regarding for the next 10 years, the deep ocean observance strategy. We have the means today. I was mentioning the space just before, but well, more and more, we have the AUVs, autonomous vehicles, or the robots that can go to the bottom and well, accomplish a lot of functions. So we have an idea of what we are dealing, including for the abyssal, as we call it, abyssal provinces there. So we have provinces, of course, depending on the configuration of the bottom of the sea, depending on the current distribution, depending on the temperature distribution, depending on the salinity distribution. So more and more, now the stake is to really come up with more and more with the deep observing system we have to come up with a coherent view of the whole machine that is the ocean, and that regulate our planet Earth. Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. What's that? Push the wrong button, I'm afraid. That's it. It's blocked. Okay, great. Yeah. This one. Yes. Yeah, I was saying that it's not flat. Absolutely not. You can imagine, I mean, at the bottom of the ocean here, you have the scale. So it's the Everest from the bottom of the sea and not to the surface, even well underwater. So you can imagine that we have a very, very, say, uneven bottom, which is extremely difficult to it explains why also very difficult to explore, but in the same time also because of all these different configurations, which is the support of different living communities, and we are discovering more and more about these living communities, extremely specific to this well, deep sea environment. Here, sometimes also, which is the case of Japan, with a very narrow continental shelf, and then immediately a deep sea trench, which is not that far from the coast. So very different configuration and extremely uneven ones with a high relief. So just to give you an idea, this is a synthetic image, but just to give you an idea how it is difficult to explore that kind of, say, relief on the bottom of the ocean when you have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 meters totally in the dark and in a 1 or 2 degrees temperature water. So it explains, and you can read in the newspapers these days how difficult it can be to find, for example, a black box on the bottom of such a ocean. So I was saying down there it is very cold, 2-4 degrees depending. It is totally dark, pitch dark, very high pressure. But it is alive. And this is incredible, and it is in the 80s that for the first time an American team discovered that, well, yes, there was not only on that planet, there was not only the photosynthesis at the basis of life, but also the chemiosynthesis. And that these communities are living in this extremely harsh environment, but they are thriving, really, around these different configurations that we have seen just now. So, as I just showed, a very environmental heterogeneity that will generate very different kind of living communities. We're just now starting to discover. So with an exceptional longevity, you can imagine in this kind of environment, of course, the processes are very slow, slow growth, hence, and all kind of different biological adaptation, of course, which interest very much the industry in regards to properties enzymes, etc., that can be exploited. So this is all about the bio-prospecting, as we and I will come back to it. And full of other resources too, oil and gas, of course, that we know, and it is happening today, and deeper, I would say. Fertilizers, for example, marine phosphates in Namibia, offshore Namibia, in a depth of 400 meters, which is not nothing. We still what we call shallow waters, but well, this is already quite deep. And other minerals potentially, but it is there. That could be tomorrow polymetallic sulfides under hydrothermal vents, the polymetallic nodules in the Central Pacific, and I will show you a picture about that. And the cobalt-rich ferromanganese crust. This is another also mixed of metals that interest a lot the industry. Of course, all depending on the resource on land, but and on the price, the market price. But that could be now there is a technology available, and that could be quite soon. And then the rare earth also. You know how strategic the rare earth, and Japan know it. I think 2 years ago, it was with China as a provider of the rare earth, and the political pressure that can be put by countries on the rare earth providing, because it's so much, it's vital for a lot of applications, especially in the electronic industry. So now actively countries are looking for rare earth mud in the bottom of the ocean. Technology is not really there for the moment, but that could come soon. I was mentioning the Arctic. As you know, with the melting of the ice, it's not just about the passage of ships to shorten their route between the oceans, but it is also about investing for these resources tomorrow. This is an economist. There was an economist summit this year, and that is these are their title: "How to Invest for Cold Feet." The Arctic race is heating up, and okay, with the game of words, but in the same time is very true, and this is something. And the governance, we'll come back to it. The governance is not there yet, in order to guarantee that we have really a sustainable development of these areas. And of course, we are not dealing with pure and pristine, as you know, of course, and not only in the coastal waters, but more and more we're discovering that, it is true for offshore waters. There are impacts that, we couldn't imagine years ago that are there. You heard from the famous gyre in the middle of the Pacific with the plastic, with the litters. This is happening in the middle of the Pacific. It's just about liters marine debris coming from the land. Deep canyons, can be a trap for plastic, etc. It's incredible. Scientists discovered at 1,000, 2,000 meters, the kind of waste deposit in the deep canyons. So that means that yes, we are dealing with a totally connected system, and that these different red zones there are not just impacting the coastal zone and the coastal waters, but also the whole ocean. And we have to take into consideration here what we call, in regard to all these different kind of impacts, the cumulative impacts. It's not just impact by impact, as we used to study, depending on the field of the scientist specialized in this field. But the problem is that all this is impacting exactly the same ecosystem. So, and the ecosystem is not just suffering from one or two impacts, but from the accumulating impacts there. And this is something really extremely, you can guess, very difficult to understand in regard to the research initiatives. So, and we are also dealing, this is quite important, I think I just showed you that, but we're dealing with a dynamic, with a system highly dynamic. And when we're talking, I put the example of the forest here, easy to understand, the cycle of the forest, with the fire, well, the fire, natural fire, or provoked by man, but well, it doesn't matter, the cycle is there. And we're always, well, going back to a new system, not to the initial state, but to a new system. And you can apply that, well, on a cycle of maybe 1, 2, or 3 days with the plankton populations. But you can apply that also on the deep seabed communities. And here we're talking sometimes about centuries. So you can imagine that, well, when you impact that kind of population, or impact that kind of population, you are not dealing with the same time scale. So here that becomes extremely much more serious. I'm not saying it's not important here, but well, it's a totally different time scale. And just a representation of the system to talking about governance, what we're talking about. I mean, if we look at the governance or in order to manage in a sustainable way our environment, whatever it is, and here the ocean, but also the coast, but also the watershed, it is, I think, the two pillars about knowledge, what we know about the system, how it functions, and then the governance, that is, how we get organized, the different actors of the society in order to use all these ecosystem services, or the products, if you want, that are given by nature, by all these different processes. And we know at the end that all, for us, is going to depend very much on the governance, the way we get organized, in order to change our management practices, so that way then we can influence the drivers, which most of them, of course, they are natural drivers, but most of them also are coming from human activities. So it is there that we can really make the difference. We won't change fundamentally the system, we are part of it, but we can change, yes, our practices, and then look at the effect on the functioning of the system. So of course, it's very important to have the knowledge, useful knowledge, I would say, to take then the right decisions, and then how to share these decisions at the level of society, so that really they can be implemented. So I will come back to it, but I would like to say a few words now about these ecosystem services. What does it mean? It's not just the fish or say the sea products we buy and that we have in our plate, but it is also the energy more and more today, and then also the supporting role of the ocean, habitat, substrate, nurseries, etc. These are services for free till now, but in regard to the degradation of the environment, we know now, because of the cost in regard to the state of the environment, we know that it's not for free. So economists are very interested to see that, well, we can put a value on these different services. Biodiversity, of course, you heard biodiversity, but biodiversity is at the core of the system. And regulation, climate change, temperature, the ocean has a carbon sink. We know that if the ocean was not there to regulate, we would have not plus 2 degrees, but much more than that. It would be probably livable. Governance, just very roughly, it's not just about government, but it's about, as I said, all the actors in the society. So the market, of course, is going to be extremely important. The state, central and local governments together, and the civil society, whatever the way of expression. And in regard to what? Private goods, yes. Public goods, yes, depending on the state, all right. But commons here. And here, well, I think it is, I would like to insist a little bit on these comments in regard to the ocean. So the comments here are not public goods, and I'm referring to the Nobel Prize economist Lina Ostrom. She passed away in 2009, in 2010, sorry, and she got the Nobel Prize in 2009. And her whole life has been devoted to how these comments function. Can we look at the way they function, not in regard to the tragedy? You probably know that book in the 50s, the tragedy of the commons. That is, nobody is responsible, and in regard to the wealth of the commons. What kind of institutions for collective action, besides the law of market and the rule of the state, what we know today? And I'm going to show you that it really happens also at the global level, not only at the community level. Global commons, common heritage of mankind. This is a key concept in regard to the governance of the ocean today, and the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. There are other examples as well. The Antarctic Treaty, 59, doesn't concern all the countries, but it's a treaty which is really talking about this common heritage of mankind. The Moon Treaty, also, and the Convention of the Law of the Sea, not to talk about the Agreement on Climate Change. All this is in the sphere of global commons. So the Convention of the Law of the Sea, with this concept of human heritage of humankind, it started. History said that 17th century already. There was a lawyer, a Dutch lawyer, who was talking. He made a book, really, a treaty on the Mare Liberum, the free sea, but saying that we should put some order in this, and already talking about 3 nautical miles from land as a territorial sea. So that was the beginning of the consideration for the organization of the space of the ocean. And then, all went well, if you can say, till the mid-20th century, where more and more, because of the technological development, fishing boats are more and more efficient, the shipping also, the trade and fisheries expansion leading to extended national claims, more and more national interest. So discussion at the UN level started in '58 with this conference on the Law of the Sea that's going to last for decades. And in '67, there was a very smart Malta's ambassador, Arvid Pardo, who called for an effective international regime over the seabed beyond clearly defined national jurisdiction. And then talking in '71, proposing a draft ocean space treaty, really, where the whole ocean is considered as a heritage of mankind. But it didn't come just exactly like that. Compromising was there because, of course, that was not acceptable for many states. So discussion, went on, and was a long negotiation then to come up with in '82 with the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea that was agreed and only ratified in '94. So you can see how the process has been on, but it's there. At least we had and we have something. So what is it? It is that I was talking about the heritage of humankind. This is the heritage of humankind in green, the bottom of the sea. After the extension of the continental shelf, that is 350 nautical miles, you can imagine, from the shore, from the coast here. So these are what we call the international waters, and this is not what is above. But this is the heritage of humankind, the concept which is underpinning the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. And the rest is still, remember, 17th century, still Mare Liberum. Anybody can do whatever they want. Well, and of course we're going to think of the fisheries here. It's free. Well, anybody can go there, except if you have a treaty. The case of the Antarctic, for example. And then here, all that area which is under not the property, not the ownership, but the sovereign rights of the coastal state. So 200 nautical miles plus, if the continental shelf is going well further, 350 nautical miles maximum in regard to the bottom of the sea. So this is I'm gonna well, come back to it, but roughly this is what the UN Convention of the Law is. So you can see, well, very immediately what are the flows, and I will come back to it. But we have still, in spite of this UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, we still an extremely fragmented approach to the different visualization. It depends on what we're talking about. Deep sea minerals. So it's going to be, yes, under the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, and here the International Seabed Authority. There's an institution dealing with the area we saw, that is the bottom of the sea in the high waters. But just that. Then you're talking about fishing. Fishing, if you look back to the UN system, fishing is under the FAO and the Regional Fisheries Management Organization. So you have to go through these organizations. Then biodiversity and habitats. So the CVD, the Convention of Biodiversity, you have also to go through this and to be a member of this Convention of Biodiversity if you want to be heard in regard to these resources. Shipping pollution, the International Maritime Organization, and so on and so on. But also with, for example, you will be surprised, but cable and pipelines, totally unregulated. Anybody can lay down the cable and pipelines. And bioprospecting, this is the big debate right now under the Convention of Biodiversity, still unregulated. So you can imagine, we're talking about heritage of mankind, but well, we are far from where the real application of these heritage of mankind, which means a redistribution, equal or fair redistribution also with the landlocked countries with not access to the sea, or developed countries who don't have the means to explore and exploit, of course, these deep sea areas. So this is the map showing these exclusive economic zone, as we call it, 200 nautical miles here. So you can see that, well, it becomes narrowed down a bit in these international waters already. And how then it's going to be complicated to deal. Here it's like we have a border, but of course you understand that an ecosystem, a global ecosystem like the ocean, well, doesn't care about these waters. It's a joke in regard to the functioning of the ecosystem, of course. So if you have two different policies in the high waters regarding, for example, the exploitation of the deep sea minerals, and another policy which is well under the country, the coastal state, under which the exclusive economic zone depend, of course, it's a total nonsense in regard to the sustainable development of the resources and the ocean. And to give you an idea, more precise, under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, it's not just 200 nautical miles, and then with the extension of the continental shelf, 350 nautical miles, but it is divided with a territorial, what we call the territorial sea, from the baseline, from the coast, and then the exclusive economic zone, which goes till the international waters. So in this area, plenty of policies are taking place, depending on the sectors, depending on the, well, also the transverse, for example, conservation policies, etc. So the problem is that also to give coherence to these sectoral and, well, conservation policies within that area. Another examples, here you have the, we are here in the Central East Pacific, and we are in the high waters. So just to give you the examples, this is the main example today of this functioning of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea under the International Seabed Authority. What we call, since many years now, there are international permits which are distributed, of course, with conditions, etc., to countries or to companies, but that has to be sponsored by countries as a member party of the convention. And this is about polymetallic nodules. For the moment, just exploration, just that. Japan, well, is there somewhere, and has a permit, international permit. He got another one, well, some time ago, a few weeks ago in the South Pacific, and well, it's for the moment we're just talking about exploration, but soon that could well become a real exploitation. So you can imagine we are not ready. It is well, simply said, we are not ready from the governance point of view. Here we have what they call area of particular environmental interest. So it is about management. It is about planning, how to organize the activities, and how to, well, with what we know, how to guarantee, say, the sustainable development of in this area of the resources that we want to exploit and keep the integrity of the environment and the ecosystem. We are still, it's the case to say, in the blue very much, not to say sometimes in the dark. Moreover, I'm not saying it myself. This is coming from the International Seabed Authority representatives, saying that, well, universality is far from being achieved. The UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, 166 countries ratified. Well, among the absent, the USA didn't ratify. So that means, for example, that the USA well cannot apply for an international permit in international waters under the International Seabed Authority, since they are not party of the Convention of the Law of the Sea. The UN Fish Stock Agreement under the FAO, different organizations, only 81 countries, and doesn't mean that well even these countries are complying really with these different conventions. The problem with the territorial waters boundary, I showed the map to well just now, but there are plenty of conflicts, and no need to tell it here in Japan, in the region with the South China Sea. But there are plenty of conflicts all over the world, not in these, only in this region of the world. The non-respect of deep, fragile ecosystems with the deep trawling, deep fishing. This is well, a very hot issue right now. On these sea mounts, what we saw at the beginning, these sea mounts extremely productive, not only regarding fixed species, but also fishes, of course. It acts as an artificial reef, and it attracts a lot of fishes. And well, hence the deep trawling fishing, thanks to the technology today, which is possible. So this is a really hot issue. And illegal, reported, unregulated fishing as well under the FAO. So all these problems there, and they are far from being well tackled, even if they are well continuous debate about it. And new issues also, which didn't exist maybe 10 years or 20 years ago. the conservation of the high seas living resources, that we know better today, and we know that, well, in regard to deep fishing, for example, we know more and more how, say, fragile these resources are, and extremely difficult then to recover after, well, deep trawl passed on these resources and destroy all the habitats. It's not just, well, it's not just a matter of weeks. It's going to be a matter of decades. It's going to be a matter of centuries sometimes. Bioprospecting, I was mentioning just before, well, there's no existing rules for the moment in the high seas. The free sea just above the bottom of the ocean. Climate change and ocean acidification is becoming also more and more a problem. Right, drug smuggling, piracy, etc. So all this needs really that, well, we look really at already the reform of this global governance system, which is far from being perfect. I was mentioning the extension of the continental shelf. So you have a map here with the exclusive economic zone plus the red zone, which is here, is the what is to the UN Convention of the Law system, international seabed, and there is a shelf extension commission, which is which review the request from the countries in order to have their continental shelf extended. That is, their own rights extended till 350 nautical miles. Well, of course, you have to prove that the continental shelf is there, etc. So it means you have to make the mapping, etc. You have to have the means to do it. So this is for, developed, rich countries that can do it, not for developing countries, certainly not. So you see that it's, quite significantly reducing also the international waters area. And why? Because, all the resources are there above the continental shelf. Mineral resources, I was talking about, fishing resources, of course. So it's about a kind of reappropriation of these common heritage of mankind. So you see how much fragile is the concept. It's always put into question as soon as there are resources at stake and exploitable resources, which is the case today. Some words about the fisheries. I think it is important because it has such an important role in regard to the sustainability and the governance of the ocean. You have here, this is coming from the FAO, and you have the progression of the catches from the fisheries year after year till 2012, and you see, of course, okay, it's increasing. This is coming from the reporting from China, but we don't know. This is about the global catch, but we don't know what is we know that the catch per unit effort and the catch's composition is totally different. And that it means that we are putting more and more power in order to increase these catches. That means more and more pressure on the environment. And we know also that this is very underestimated because most of the time the small-scale fishing along the coast is not taken into consideration just because there's no statistic to report to the FAO. So the situation is this, and again, this is coming from the FAO. 52% fully exploited today of the fish, different fish stocks. So that means today, 2012, 2013, say 7 billion, with these, the fish accounted for between 30% to 50% of the animal protein consumed worldwide, which is the case today. So you can guess in 2025 when we're going to be 8.5 billion something. So from where is going to come the fish if we continue like that? It doesn't mean that the fish is not there, but it means that with the management practice the governance we have in regard to fisheries today, we are really going against the wall if we continue the same way. So there's really, and it's urgent. It's not just for later, but it's very urgent. So dead end or comprehensive reform of the law of the sea. So I would like to say a few words about that. From proposal. Let's dream. But well, a lot of people are working on that, and there's a lot of debate at the international level going on. Thanks God, in order to look at how that UN Convention of the Law of the Sea and the global governance from global to local could be changed and adapted. Well, first of all, here, well, just to remind you what we've seen before, that is heritage, human heritage of mankind is here, all right? And, well, why not? The human heritage of mankind, because while we're dealing with one ecosystem, should be that. That is, from the territorial waters, the border of the territorial waters, including the high waters, and not only the bottom, but also the whole. Of course, we are in a three-dimension system, so the whole water column and the surface, that should be the common heritage of mankind. Of course, it won't be changed just in one day, but it is this which is the realistic solution if we want really to save the integrity of the system. So, and of course, with all the institutional arrangement that should come with it. I don't want to have no time to tonight to come into details, but this is something we could talk about later or in another conference. So, what can we do realistically? I mean, it's not that there's nothing to do because the change is too big. No, there are some steps that could be taken, and it's there. I mean, with what exists. First of all, of course, you won't be surprised I talk about knowledge. How can we care about something we don't know? And I was mentioning again the space. Well, we know less in the ocean than we know the space. So, and for that, we have, which doesn't exist for the moment, we have to have a global monitoring system for the ocean. Something, this is not only the share between specialists, but something which is really shared by, I would say, the whole global society. This is very important because this is about awareness, etc. So I have to speed up. So I think Robert, short-term profit versus long-term development. Valuing, I was mentioning the ecosystem services. In order to incorporate these ecosystem services value into the decision-making process. That would certainly change a lot. And also, we know at the UN level right now after the Rio +20 of the Sustainable Development Goals. There's a debate right now, open debate at the UN. So we are fighting to have an ocean Sustainable Development Goals as well, which is not given. There's still a lot of discussion about that. And of course, the strengthening, this is very important, regional ocean governance. It is at the regional level. Regional, I mean transboundary between different countries, at the regional sea level that we can make, today, really the change. And it is happening in some regions. So, an idea here, I read an article some time ago and from a modelist, who have been a socioeconomist, have been working on the modelization of, what about closing the high seas to fishing? And very interestingly, if you close, you are dealing with a single, and unique and connected system. You closing the high seas to fishing, it doesn't mean that fishing won't be better than within the exclusive economic zone. We have to look really at it twice, and I think it's an extremely interesting proposal. Of course, that's going to be a scandal for some fishing lobbies, etc. But at the end, that could be extremely rewarding in regard to even to the fisheries. We also dealing here with a continuous system. So it's about, well, governance and policies from the watershed on land, of course, because you know that 80% of the pollution is coming from the land. Then, well, in between the land and the sea, and the offshore, of course, here. So, and at the end, to link from the global level, to link to this local implementation, well, a lot of things happening on the coast. A lot of communities, etc., municipalities, local governments, well, are doing a lot of initiatives. The problem is how to federate, how to coordinate, how to network these different initiatives so that they really can make the difference, well, in a bottom-up way in regard to, at the end, the global governance. So all this is totally linked, of course. And you have to have that kind of vision if really you want to make the difference in regard to the reform of the system. So still, state sovereignty, whatever the UN system which is in place, it is always to the state then to decide. They can ratify the convention, but then it's up to them to apply really that convention into their own national system. So that's what we have now, more and more. A lot of countries, including Japan, have an ocean policy. This is new. This is new. The ocean policy of Japan, it just dates back from, if I'm not wrong, 2008. So this is very new, and it's the case for most of the countries, including the USA. So, and here, the regional level, more and more, people are working there at the regional level, because we're dealing with scales that are, well, I would say, manageable. And it's then a matter of collaboration between these countries, between at the national level, but also at the regional level, at the level of the regional seas, for example. And this is happening, for example, in Europe, under the EU and the European Commission, in the different, well, European seas, but also now here in the East Asian seas. There are a lot of debate and, intergovernmental arrangement in regard to the management, at least for the environment consideration of these regional seas. So it's the beginning, and it's really something which is happening. So I've been looking, and I think this is one of the last slides, Robert. I've been looking at these common heritage, these conditions of the management of the commons coming from Elina Ostrom, I was mentioning before, the economist. And these are, well, the criteria they have been, well, she came up in regard to the, well, good management of these commons. It's interesting. So if you apply this to the global common, here, exclusive economic zone high seas boundaries are clearly defined. It's not yet the case. There are a lot of conflicts between countries. So we have to, well, clear these boundaries of, well, the exclusive economic zone between countries if we want to come up with a real governance system. Here in gray, the rules governing uses are well matched to needs and conditions. Well, not really. You saw just before, for example, the international civil authorities. They're still, well, fighting with these rules. We don't know exactly how tomorrow, how these, well, international permits going to be managed. All parties can participate in modifying the rules. Yes, we are in an intergovernmental system, and it is the case, even if the procedure is extremely heavy. Consensus-based monitoring system exists? No, as I was saying, there is no consensus-based monitoring system for the moment at the level of the ocean. Graduated system of sanctions is used, not much. And the parties have access to conflict resolution mechanisms, yes. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, Jamaica, has a sea tribunal, which is, well, trying to solve the problems, the conflicts in regard to the easy boundaries. And then, of course, our polycentric forms, that is this kind of nested governance approach from the local scale to the global scale. Everything's connected. This is quite important. So you see that, well, we're far from, I would say, fulfill all these criteria in regard to the good management of this common, which is the ocean, as a heritage of humankind. So system thinking, I think nexus is a well buzzword today. Nexus thinking in terms of relationships, connectedness, and I think talking about the ocean, it's, well, we are in a fluid system, it's totally the case. And the context, of course, we're talking about, at the end, we're talking about communities, we're talking about countries, of course, but we're talking about places also where there is a specific culture, etc. So this context is fundamental. And taking the world as it is and seeking ways to build on possibilities, and I'm not seeing it. That was in regard to the UN Framework Convention of Climate Change, Hartwell paper. It was just work with what we have. So this is my last slide, I think. World Oceans Day. There's a World Oceans Day on the 8th of June, and so please point it and pencil it in your agenda. And we've been talking about the future we want, the Rio plus 20, as you know. Well, I think we should also talk about the future ocean we want, 70% of the planet. Thank you very much, and sorry to be too long.
Thank you very much. Sorry to press you, but you know the group has a lot of questions. So I promised the most dynamic group in the city. So do ask the best questions in town. Yes, if you could identify yourself before.
I'm Rick Westberg, oceanographer by training. I'm an enthusiastic supporter of your vision for a better managed ocean, but if we look at current events around the world, I see most countries are busy seeking their own interests, and we have a lot of corporations wielding tremendous power, using a lot of energy to exploit resources to maximize profits. And is it possible to be optimistic that we'll be able to reach a better situation in which at least the pace of degradation of the environment can be reduced, if not reversed?
Well, I think, well, it's not just about being optimistic, but, well, I've been trying to show that we have the tools, I think. It's very much, I think, a question of vision, and especially, of course, the policymakers. Most of the time, the problem is that there is a divide between the environment and, as you say, sectoral development, industry development, the finance, the economy, and the finance. And we have two crises today. The environment, climate change, well, but not only climate change. And on the other side, the economy. So policymakers are always, well, of course, first of all, busy with the economy and the employment, etc. Forgetting that, well, environment is part of the solution. It's not one after the other, but it's both at the same time. I think that's really, once the policymakers, well, will understand that, really, that, well, both have to have be led together, maybe there will be well, something happening. But at the same time, I think at the international level, all different levels, there are a lot of things happening within the different lobbies, etc. And if you compare the situation from what it was maybe well, 10 years, 20 years or 30 years ago, for example, before the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, just in '92, well, that was already, I mean, at that time, that was really something. It's not that, well, we have nothing and that, well, there is no hope in regard to what we have. No, on the contrary. But I think it's very much a problem of vision. I mean, to start with from the policymakers, really, point of view. So we have to work on that. And they quite, well, many people, I mean, I think many institutions are working on it. So we have to break the silos, I would say, between the different compartments. making the policy.
Byron Siegel with Baxter Pharmaceutical Company. Two questions. I was intrigued about the concept of ecosystem services.
Yeah.
And is there any concrete examples where that has actually been applied in the sense that those services have actually been monetized and used to drive policy, number one? And number two, your proposal to ban high seas fishing. Other than high seas drift net fishing, are there any examples where that's happened?
Yeah, deep fishing, deep trawler fishing. Yeah, in international waters. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the point. I mean, drift net is one thing, but today the main concern is deep fishing,
And that's
deep trawler fishing. Yeah, it's in international waters.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the ecosystem services in terms of
So the ecosystem services, it's on the way. There's no, as you know, it's the old GDP, which is still there, and but I think we can have changes in the years coming, certainly, because we have more and more. Even you can see the governments really starting to look really at the not only the economic production, but also at this integrity of the ecosystem, and first of all, at the well-being of people. There are a lot now. If you go on the web, you're going to see a lot of index proposed, etc., in regard to the sustainable development, but also the health of the ocean, and you're going to have this ecosystem service idea, which is going to come back all the time. So it's not yet included really in the nation accounting, but I think it's going its way, and soon it will be there. But of course, the economists will still have to work on it. It's rather complicated. But just one example that just came to my mind is the compensation system. And in the US, the compensation system is extremely developed. And the compensation system is based on what? Ecosystem services. To make the calculation of the value of what has to be repaired in regard to the damage.
The one concrete example I'm aware of in the U.S. was New York City valued a watershed.
Yeah.
And they said this watershed provides filtration service for drinking water, which if we engineered that much volume of water would cost $2 billion. So they actually put a number on the filtration services that the watershed provided in the upper and head. I was just wondering if there's anything like that for oceans, but
for ocean, no.
Okay.
Yeah, on land, yes, that's right,
yeah.
but not for the ocean. That's right, not yet. And there is a group working on these, but you can understand that it's much more complicated.
That's why I was intrigued. It's hard.
But still, I think we have to take into account this, and we have to really push the research, not only the economists. I think it's also natural, say social sciences that should really get involved into that.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. My name is John Bear. I'm from the Korean Embassy here. I found that EEG was made with a good intention, but now we are listening in this particular area because there is no maritime boundary EEG yet. We are listening to more sort of becomes source of conflict rather than a framework of cooperation. So in your proposal, I saw that you believe that you should erase between the distinction between EEG and common heritage, and then you can, I think, solve the problem. But then, am I right in understanding that you are in favor of the common heritage approach, and you are not you are against the EEG approach?
No, both, and I'm going to explain you why. Because the extension of this concept of the common heritage, to the exclusive economic zone doesn't change the status of the exclusive economic zone. Still, the exclusive economic zone is under all the resources, under the sovereign right of the coastal state, which owns which has this well, exclusive economic zone. But in the same time, this coastal state has to be responsible because, well, he's dealing with a common heritage. So that means that, well, the policy that's going to be applied in the international waters for the exploitation of deep sea minerals, for example, is going to be exactly the same policy that should be applied by the state who ratified the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, because it's dealing, okay, with the sovereign rights there, but dealing also with a common heritage, because we are in a totally connected system. So we cannot pretend that there is a, you know, our frontiers. This is a human, totally human story. I mean, but in regard to the sustainability, integrity of the system, anybody can understand that well. It doesn't. Well, it doesn't. It's not there. It's simply not there. So we have to find a way where, well, respecting this exclusive economic zone, say area, and then respecting also this concept of common heritage, that we deal with one system in a coherent way, exclusive economic zone and high waters, because this is a well, continuous ecosystem, totally connected. There is no frontier in regard to the ecosystem. So that's what I mean. I think this is very, of course, it's going to be a very long discussion, you can imagine, but I think that should be, in principle, very receivable by the coastal states in that condition. And now let me add something else also. I was talking, you were asking me about, well, are you optimistic, etc. I think we are not well enough imaginative in regard to the governance of the ocean. We have to be much more imaginative. There are plenty of other possibilities. For example, the IUCN has been talking about marine peace parks. What it is, it's simply, well, countries, and to start with the environment, well, agreeing together that, well, they're going to, well, in regard to the knowledge of that area, they're going to work together and develop, well, a common research program, for example. This is a beginning. Just, well, 1 week ago or 10 days ago, there's been an alliance that has been signed between, of course, this is just an alliance. I mean, it's not legally binding, but that has been signed for the Sargasso Sea, for the management of the Sargasso Sea. And at the center, Bermuda, as a coastal state, of course, with its own exclusive economic zone, but the alliance is about also the international waters. And it's not in contradiction with the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. It's just, I mean, well, countries saying, okay, we're going to try to manage that area altogether. They are not saying this is our area, no, but well, we're going to try to manage this together. So you can imagine, of course, there are a lot of political, say, motives behind all the time. I agree. But you see, I mean, I think there's a lot of, well, different governance, if we are a little bit imaginative, that well, are possible from the, say, informal point of view, not only just under the UN system. It is there. This is our, well, common reference. But at the same time, well, any kind of governance agreement in regard to start with the environment, because, well, this is less, I would say, politically sensitive. That is something that could be done. Regional seas. For example, I don't know how to call this sea just in front of you between Korea and Japan. But well, well, this sea, there is a regional, as you know, there's a regional seas well, management agreement under UNEP, which is called NAOPAP. So Korea is well, a member of this NAOPAP arrangement with China and with Japan to try what? Just well, to make that sea well, say, keeping its function and productive for everybody, for the benefit of all the coastal states around that sea. So I think this regional seas well, agreement is really something that can then open to well, further agreements in the future. I think we have to be optimistic, otherwise nothing is going to be done. Let me give you also the example of the Mediterranean. I know very well. Mediterranean, even countries, there is also regional seas agreement, the convention, the Barcelona Convention, and even between the war between countries, the only table around which they were sitting was the table of the regional seas convention. Why? Because this is about the environment. So at least we had that link, which was still there. And I think, this is something very significant in regard to further improvement in the relationship between coastal states. So we have to try everything, I think. Sorry.
Yeah, my name is Kurt Sieber, Austrian Business Council. We have no sea, so we have really nothing to worry. But I have two questions anyhow. Could you show once more the picture about the slide about the fish catch?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Now, is the understanding correct that by now, that's until 2006, that China is catching 1/3 of the total fish?
That's a reporting. Okay. There's a lot of debate about that. Yeah. This is the official reporting. Of course, the FAO is functioning with the official reporting from countries. Yeah. So this is from the official reporting from China. And even some are saying that, China is under-reporting. Yeah, okay. Or maybe, depends. Or over-reporting.
Okay, follow up. Is fish farming part of this, or is this just high?
No, this is just fisheries, fishing.
Fishing, okay, yes. No, I understand that China is having about 50% of their fish animal protein in that sense by fish farming, whereas this percentage in Japan is only 20% at this stage. Could you elaborate on fish farming as a whole?
The fish farming in China traditionally is, first of all, is a freshwater fish. And when, in the last say, decade has been now also the development of, sea fish in cages. But traditionally, there's a huge production. I don't have the numbers in mind, but there's huge production of freshwater fish. So you have to look at both of them. I mean, I can't tell you today if, the sea fish, including shrimps, etc., is above the production of the freshwater fish. I'm not sure about the numbers, but it's very significant, the freshwater farming.
Okay, thank you. Well, second question. We have a lot of interesting disputes about all these little islands and shoals and whatever they are called. What kind of courts are available to settle such international disputes for territorial claims in the ocean?
There is the what we call the international, don't remember exactly the name, Ocean Court, which is based in Jamaica under this UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. This court is dealing with all the conflict in between easy boundaries between states. So the states are presenting, most of the time the court is asking this, first of all the states, concerned states, to discuss together and try to find a way, an arrangement. If it is not possible, then they go to the court, and then the court gives it's a very long process, of course, but it is there to try to solve this kind of conflict in regard to the easy boundaries, and there are plenty of them.
Are those decisions binding?
Yes, they are binding. Yes, of course, they are binding. Of course, from the moment the country is a member, has ratified the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. But if not, the case of the USA. Why the USA is not signing and ratifying? There's a reason for that. So they are not, of course, well, binding by anything in this case. But on the other side, well, for example, in the Arctic, that could become a problem in the future, because there's no, I would say, no channel for the moment that is usable by, for example, by the United States in regard to well, misuse, etc., using, for example, this court, international court. So, well, I think it is discussed in the level of the government in the US right now.
Just one same subject. Is the International Court of Justice in The Hague, are they involved in any specific?
No. It's a specific ocean related court in Jamaica under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, just to give you an example, the International Court of Justice, as you know, we read it 2 days ago, in regard to Antarctic whaling, for example. So that has been a decision for Antarctic whaling. But here it's different. We are not talking about boundaries, etc., in regard to the EEZ, but that was about whaling and a resource. So, well, in that case, it's right. That was well, from the International Court of Justice.
One short question.
Fish farming was mentioned. Is fish farming an alternative to ocean farming? I mean, to ocean fishing? In other words, if we want to protect the oceans, should we have more fish farming in the way that we have animal farming to protect natural parks?
Okay, that's my personal opinion. And it's totally unrealistic. Now, well, people that believe that, well, yes, tomorrow the aquaculture is going to replace the fisheries. But, well, we are really, I mean, talking nonsense here. Fish farming, well, for the moment, the feed, which well, allows to raise the juveniles, etc., is based on what? On the fish meal. That is what is fished by the fishing industry. And till now, okay, we've seen the future, but till now, it has been impossible to replace that fish meal in order to have robust and well-growing animals in regard to the aquaculture. So this is a stumbling block, which is as long as this stumbling block is not well overcome, definitely aquaculture is not so well. It will be developing, of course, but it won't replace fisheries. And why replace something we have for free with something that costs a lot? I mean, if we know how to manage it well correctly in regard to the capacity of the environment. This is, I think, I mean, this is totally foolish to say that, well, aquaculture is going to replace the fisheries. It has absolutely, even from the economic point of view, it's a nonsense. So, and I know that's the basis of a very serious think tank, etc., but I think they are on the right track.
I'm Pat Utley from Greenheart, and I'm interested in the coupling that you mentioned between technology and the extension of the EEZ. I think that was in the 1950s, and I'm wondering if you can imagine a technological change that might facilitate some kind of retraction of the EEZ. That's one part of the question. The other one was the gentleman from Austria reminded me that when it comes to international convention, landlocked countries can flag vessels. So in a way they have access to a certain amount of sovereignty, and I'm wondering if that, or perhaps the model of the international agreements on Antarctica, where everybody took a wedge and the time horizon was shortened so that it became acceptable for everybody. If there's some way that you can imagine a model for future effective international governance, to see that in technology.
Well, maybe to start with the second question, Antarctic Treaty. I think it's a very good example of say common heritage and management between here, 30 countries or something like that. Yes, that could be, I think, not copied, but at least give some inspiration for other kind of agreements in regard to the Arctic, for example. But the situation is quite different in the Arctic from what it is in the Antarctic. So, but definitely, Antarctic Treaty, I think, is a very, very good example of the management of a common heritage, with all the problems still. We know that, for example, they've been used, that they are large, since it's a consensus based, it's very difficult to make any decision. For the large, very large APA, for example, the marine protected area, still it's it's lagging because there's a veto from some countries within that Antarctic Treaty. So consensus based is a system which is very very heavy and sometimes which really is a problem in regard to urgent decisions like these ones, for example. So Antarctic Treaty, for example, didn't decide in regard to the whaling. That has to go to the International Court of Justice for making a decision, which makes sense because we also dealing in the Antarctic partly with international waters. So, and now the first question, I'm not sure that I got it.
Technology, coupling technology and the expansion of the EEZ. I thought that was interesting that maybe deep sea fishing technologies. I think that expansion came on the west coast of South America.
Yeah,
Peru and Chile had a zone war. I was wondering if you can imagine some kind of technological fix for retracting that EEZ zone back to something reasonable, 20 miles or 15 miles.
I don't think here the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea is there, and you won't, from what it is now, we have to work with what we have, which has, as you saw, has been a very long debate at the international level with a lot of compromise there at the end. So, I mean, better to keep what we have and to see how that can be then managed or reformed or improved, but basically keep the system as it is. It has taken so much time to be negotiated, I think.
Is there some kind of amendment being negotiated now to the?
There are, yes, at the UN level. There are debates in regard to the reform of these, of course, of these UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. It is what I said. It's not from me. It was coming, as I said, from the International Seabed Authority people themselves. So, they are saying it loud now, and they're making it known that, if tomorrow, for example, just talking about mineral resources, we have an exploitation, real exploitation is going to take place, and that could come soon for some of the deposits. The International Authority is not ready. It's not ready, simply. The request for international permits, etc., now are coming in more and more, and they're already overwhelmed with the demand. And the rules, regulation, etc. Now they are making, surveys to know how they could improve, how they could set up rules and regulations in order to this exploitation to really happen, if possible, as much as possible in a sustainable way. But so it's on the way, I think, and even at a high level, UN level, people are very well aware. Now it's a question of conflict and national interest, as you say. So of course it's a power game.
Bill Court, I'm in the fishing industry. In one of your slides, you said that the London Dumping Convention was responsible for ocean waste, and then you said somewhere, you said somewhere else, I believe, that 80% of ocean pollution comes from the land. How much does the London Dumping Convention deal with waste generated from land, and how effective are they? And if they aren't, it seems that that's the greatest threat to the oceans. And who manages that and controls that, and how effective are they? Thank you very much.
Okay, have to be more specific. The London Convention is dealing with the dumping at sea. So that means from ships and not from the land. And when it comes to the pollution from the land, this is under UNEP, the UN Environmental Program, and not under the convention, London Convention, which is dealing only with the dumping at sea, any kind of waste. But dumping at sea can be, for example, dredging, the port dredging that is then dumped at sea with very contaminated sediments, as you know. So this is, yes, under the London Convention. But for the rest, all the pollution, which is these 80%, something coming from the land on the watershed, is under the, of course, the nations, the states, and under UNEP, under the UN Environmental Program, which is different. So just dumping at sea for the London Convention.
Can I ask a political question? I mean, personally, I agree with the vision you've laid out, but I'm sure you know, in the United States, there are people who think the United Nations is out to establish, one world government domination. I mean, these people who are way out there on the extreme, but they have a political voice in the United States, and that's why we're not doing anything about climate change, I believe, and a lot of these other serious issues, because we've got a substantial minority who have a very, very peculiar worldview. Yeah, and you see, you see that there's some hope of getting things done without the United States, in some sense, because I don't see the United States getting on board in a meaningful way to cooperate and to address these issues.
Absolutely not. I mean, of course not. I mean, of course, the US has to be there, and it is the case, because well, the picture is much more complicated than that. It's not just a question of signing and ratifying the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. It's also participating, and the US are there to all the research in regard to the knowledge, first of all, but also all the international organizations I was mentioning. Even if some of them are under the UN system, but all the time, of course, the US are there, are represented. So they know how to make their voice heard, and at the same time, nobody is putting into question, on the contrary, the participation of the US. It's, it's indispensable. We won't find a solution without the first power of the planet. It's impossible. Clear. But again, it's not that the US is totally absent from these discussions, etc. No, absolutely not. On the contrary. But, as a matter of fact, the federal government, for the moment, till now, didn't sign and ratify this UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. That's all. But the rest, they're pretty active.
Thank you. I think we've run out of time, more or less. Is there anything you'd like to add? Or?
Well, no, thank you very much, because it was a bit long, I think.
No,
no, it's okay. We're on the time. So thank you very much for listening and for this discussion, because I can see, a lot of you, I was not talking to, a large audience, knowing nothing about the ocean. I didn't know exactly what would be the audience. So I'm extremely happy, and thank you also to the embassies to come here to be represented, because I know how much sensitive these ocean governance aspects are. But from my point of view, and of course, we have a point of view, not a political point of view. I'm not a policymaker, but I think that the policymakers should listen much more to the, not only the experts, but also people really trying to look at different ways, at innovative ways of finding out solutions to something that will look totally stuck or blocked right now. I think there are always a solution when we're dealing with such open space as the ocean. So, and we're ready to try to give a good advice and to contribute to these solutions if it's possible.
Well, thank you very much.